Dr. Amina here, and today we're going to talk about carbs. Should you eat them? Should you avoid them? So many people are torn when it comes to carbs and, just deciding whether or not they should eat them. They eat some carbs, they feel guilty, there are all these diets, carbs are bad, keto, all these things, right? And so a lot of people are confused. And some people, they avoid carbs, they feel awful, they eat some, they feel great, they have a lot of energy and so on, and people are just confused because, again, of all the mixed messages out there. So what I'm going to talk about is what it is about carbs that could make them have a negative impact on your health, and how to have carbs in a way that your health is supported, right? So the thing about carbs, right, which carbs is short for carbohydrates, and essentially for carbohydrates is one of the three main macronutrients, the other two being protein and fats. And carbs, in my opinion, are an essential food. They come with a lot of benefits, but the problem comes with carbs that have been processed. So essentially carbs that in the factory they were tampered with, the naturally occurring fiber was removed to make it maybe more palatable, more tasty, okay? The naturally occurring fat was removed to enable it to have a longer shelf life, because fat in food could potentially go rancid, and so you can't have the thing preserved and stored for long enough, right? So these are the things they do to carbs, right, to enable them to last longer, essentially. And in doing those things, in removing the naturally occurring fiber and in removing the naturally occurring fat, and then further processing these things, grinding them and milling them into this fine powder, where it is basically the body doesn't have to do any work to digest it. And so doing these three things causes the carbs to have that negative impact where the blood sugar goes up, and with an increase in blood sugar goes insulin, and then doing this all the time over and over again is what can contribute to the development of insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, whatever you want to call it, but essentially the constellation of medical issues that can, or not necessarily, culminate in type 2 diabetes. Okay, that is a problem with carbs that have been processed in a factory, refined so that there's nothing left for your body to do. So how can you have carbs in a way that it's not going to flood the body with sugar, cause this massive increase in insulin, cause storage of fat, because if we're not burning all that extra glucose, then it's going to be stored as fat. What is it that we can do to prevent all of this, right? One is to have carbs that were not tampered with in a factory. So the common carbs, bread is probably one of the commonest, or basically wheat-based carbs, okay? Those would be the commonest carbs consumed. Me personally, I still love bread actually, but it's just not good for me to eat all that bread, right? But back in the day, I would have slice after slice, just slices and slices of bread, 4 slices at a time. And that's just, flour, wheat that's ground. And even whole wheat is basically same or similar, very similar in terms of the impact on the body, right? It's very similar to white flour bread because it's just milled, it's just ground so fine that it's just this rapid absorption, right? So bread, biscuits, muffins, bagels, tortillas, all these things, right? These common flour-based foods, wheat flour-based foods, right? You have to consider replacing those instead with starches that have not been milled like that. So we're talking things like you can get starch from peas and beans, right? You can get starch from even nuts have starch. I mean, yes, they have protein, yes, they have fat, right? But they also have fiber, right? And they're not processed, they're not overly processed. Flax seeds, all these things, they're not overly processed. Quinoa, that's another starch, right? They call it an ancient grain. It's not milled and processed like that. Now rice, there are different degrees of processing of rice, but there's brown rice, which has more of the fiber. There's black rice as well, which has more fiber, right? So you want things that are minimally processed. And bread, like wheat, anything with wheat is going to be probably the most processed starch, right? So go for those where you can look at them. There's some other grains. There's like amaranth and farro and a bunch of other ones, right? But essentially, the less processed, right, the more whole, you see the whole grain, right? Even like steel cut oats, right, where it's not like rolled, and there's even instant oats, which is more processed. So you want to really have it where it's unprocessed, it's not tampered with by the factory, and so much of the natural ingredients have been retained. When you retain fiber, it means that you have to do more work to chew the food, right, compared to when you milled it, ground it, remove the fiber, remove the fat, and so on, right? When you have everything there, it's harder. Even something like black rice is pretty hard. In fact, some people, it takes getting used to, because it's basically rice that's on the crunchy side, right? So you have to do more work chewing carbohydrates that are unrefined. And because you're going to be doing more work, it means that you're probably not going to eat as much, right? Bread is so easy to eat, so easy to and quick to eat. It gets digested quickly, and so you can eat a lot because your body's moving it down pretty quickly. So one benefit of having the carbohydrate that is not processed is that you have to do more work to eat it, right? There's more work digesting it. Of course, digestion starts in the mouth, and so maybe you get tired. You're just not going to overdo it because of all the work you need to do, right? The second thing with food that is unprocessed or much less processed is that it might not be there's less likelihood of it being addictive, right? And so you're just not going to eat as much. Think of something like potato chips, right? That's a processed starch. They have the potato and they put all this flavor and so on. Well, actually they slice it, but some of them it's actually ground up, like potato flour, and then they form it into these chips, right? But yeah, these things, like even black rice, I like to use that example. It's just not quite as tasty as white rice. I love white rice, but I just choose black rice because I think it's better for me. And sometimes we have white rice. I had white rice this past Sunday. But things that are more processed tend to be more tasty, and so you can overeat them. And if it's less processed, it's tasty, but it's not as tasty, and so you're not going to overdo them, right? The third thing with having the naturally occurring carb is that because of the fiber, it's more bulky, right? So even something like eating potato with the skin, or having things like quinoa where they have more fiber, right? Having these things, or even vegetables. How could I forget vegetables and beans? Those things are so bulky because of all the fiber, so they're going to help you to feel full or feel satisfied earlier compared to like plain bread or plain white rice or plain white mashed potatoes, where there's not much fiber in those. So you chew them, it doesn't take much to chew. You swallow them, it doesn't take much to break down in the stomach, and then they just kind of move through your system pretty quickly. So you're not going to get full because it just moves straight through the stomach very, very quickly, right? Compared to if you have something that's more bulky, and so it's kind of there in the stomach is feeling fuller, and so you're gonna get that signal, oh, okay, I'm actually full, I can't hold anymore, right? So that's the third thing, just the increased bulk from all the vegetables and all the fiber from whatever you're taking from the unrefined starch, so you end up eating less, right? And then the fourth thing I'm going to mention in today's video is that when you have the naturally occurring starch close to nature as possible, starch that's not been processed in the factory, because it has the fiber bulking it up, right? It means that more of it moves down to the large intestines. So fiber can cause you to absorb 30% less of the food that you eat, 30% less of your meal, because it's trapping 30% of what you have on your plate to move further down to your colon. And of course, this provides food for the good bacteria in your intestines. So it's a win-win situation. You don't get overburdened by all this, refined starch, right, which goes into your system as glucose. And then because you have that fiber, this goes down and your good bacteria in your intestines are fed, they're kept happy, everything is kept in balance, okay? And also you have a big plate of food, but you're not absorbing all of it. You're only absorbing maybe 70% of it. So you might think, oh, I have 1,000 calories on my plate, But if a lot of that is fiber, because it wasn't a food that was super refined, then your body is not getting your body's not going to get is only going to get 70% of what you have on your plate. 30% of it is going to move down to your intestines, to the large intestine. So, or the large colon, the colon. So those are some of the ways you can have carbs in a way where your whole body is supported. Essentially, you want to have carbs that are as close as possible to nature. Vegetables, you're not gonna run into problem with vegetables. Things like broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, carrots, right? You're just not gonna get into problems with vegetables, that type of fiber. And another thing too is that people demonize carbs, but vegetables, the fiber is a carb. It's just an indigestible carb. Okay, so you want to have carbohydrates that did not go to a factory. They did not go to a factory. They were taken from the farm and put on the shelf. Okay, and when you do that, you are off to a better start, off to an improved start, and you don't have to be afraid, have to have this big fear of carbs, and oh my, I shouldn't have carbs. Now everybody's situation is different and choices should be individualized. Okay, some people need more than others depending on activity level and just whatever personal preferences and what's going on in the body and so on. Do I eat bread sometimes when I go out occasionally? This weekend I'll be out away from home, so I might or might not have bread. In fact, I probably won't have bread because there'll be other good things to eat, right? But everything should be individualized. Something that's provided by nature, generally speaking, is probably not going to be the worst thing for you. The problem is what has been done to this thing in the factory. You do not want a lot, if anything at all, to be done to your food, especially where your carbohydrates and just your food in general is concerned. So don't fear carbs in general. If anything, try to avoid the carbs that were tampered with in a factory. I hope you all found this helpful. Share, like, subscribe to the channel for more videos when they arise. Have a good day.